You know exactly what happens when your phone lights up with an incoming call from a number you recognize. It's not a stranger. It's someone you actually know. And something tightens in your chest anyway. You let it ring. You watch it ring. And then you text them back 2 minutes later saying, "Hey, sorry I missed you. What's up?" And you weren't sorry. And you didn't miss it. And if they call again, you will do the exact same thing. This isn't laziness. And it isn't rudeness, even though you've been told it is. There's something specific happening in people who genuinely cannot bring themselves to pick up the phone, and it has a lot more to do with how their brain is wired than how much they care about you. So let's actually get into it. Every phone call contains something that texting completely removes. Ambiguity in real time. When a message comes in, you read it, you sit with it, you decide what it means, and you respond when you're ready. The whole interaction happens at a pace you control. A phone call gives you none of that. The other person's tone is right there, immediate, unedited. A pause means something. A word chosen badly means something. And you have maybe half a second to process all of it and respond before the silence becomes uncomfortable. For most people, that's fine. Slightly awkward at worst. But for a specific group of people, that half a second gap is where everything falls apart. There's a concept in psychology called processing speed, the rate at which your brain takes in information, makes sense of it, and produces a response. It's not intelligence. High processing speed doesn't make you smarter. What it does is make real-time conversation feel effortless because your brain is cycling through the loop fast enough that you never feel behind. Lower processing speed, and the loop still works fine, it just needs more time. Texting gives you that time. Phone calls don't. And before anyone says it, this has nothing to do with social ability. Some of the most socially perceptive people you will ever meet hate phone calls. Because perception and speed are not the same thing. You can be remarkably good at reading people and still need a beat to figure out what you actually want to say back. But there's something else going on, and this is the part that tends to surprise people. Phone calls are vulnerable in a way that texts are not. Not emotionally vulnerable, structurally vulnerable. When you're on a call, everything is happening at once and none of it is retrievable. You can't edit what you just said. You can't reread the last 3 lines to make sure you understood correctly. You can't take 60 seconds to figure out what you actually think before responding. It's live. It's gone the moment it happens. And for people whose brains are wired to want accuracy, to want their words to actually represent what they mean, that is an incredibly uncomfortable format. Research on communication apprehension, a term developed by James McCroskey in the 1970s, identifies a consistent pattern across people who experience anxiety specifically around oral communication. Not all communication. Not social interaction generally. Just the spoken, real-time kind. And critically, these same people often communicate with ease and confidence in writing. The anxiety isn't about the person on the other end. It's about the format. And here's what makes this more complicated. Most people who hate phone calls have never been told this is a real thing. What they've been told, usually by someone slightly irritated at them, is that it's inconsiderate. That real adults answer the phone. That if you actually cared, you just call. So they absorb that. They internalize it as a character flaw rather than a communication style. And then they carry a low-grade guilt about something that is, at its core, just a preference with a perfectly coherent psychological explanation behind it. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in the body during an unexpected call, because this is where it gets specific. The phone rings without warning. Immediately, your nervous system registers it as an unscheduled demand. You don't know the tone, the context, the emotional weight of what's coming. You haven't had time to prepare. For someone who runs high in sensory processing sensitivity, that sudden intrusion doesn't just feel slightly inconvenient. It lands like a small interruption to the entire internal environment they've been managing. The brain shifts into a kind of alert mode before the call even connects. And now you're already behind before the conversation starts. Texting eliminates all of this. There is no ambush. The message exists at a distance. You approach it when you're ready. You respond when you've thought it through. The whole thing happens on terms that actually allow your brain to function the way it functions best. This isn't avoidance. It's optimization. But there's a version of this that gets darker, and it's worth being honest about it. For some people, the preference for text over calls isn't just about processing speed or sensory load. It's about control, specifically about emotional exposure. A text can be crafted. It can be reviewed. You can sound exactly the way you want to sound. A phone call cannot be managed the same way. Your voice shakes when you're upset. You laugh when you're nervous. You trail off when you're uncertain. All of that is audible. All of that is real. And for someone who has spent a significant amount of energy learning to manage how they come across, that exposure is genuinely threatening. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet way where you find yourself suddenly very busy every time the phone rings. And the tell is this. It's not that they never want to connect. People who hate phone calls often have text conversations that go on for hours. Deep ones. Personal ones. The kind that would actually qualify as real intimacy if they were happening out loud. They're not avoiding connection. They're avoiding the specific kind of exposure that comes with the uncontrolled format of a voice call. That is a meaningful distinction. And collapsing those two things into the same thing, treating it as pure avoidance, misses what's actually going on. There's also a generational layer here that matters. People who grew up with texting as their first real communication tool didn't develop their social instincts around phone calls the way previous generations did. They developed them around text, which means their fluency, their comfort, their actual emotional vocabulary was built inside a written medium. Expecting them to feel equally comfortable in a format they never really learned the same way is a bit like expecting someone to feel equally confident in their second language. The content is the same. The fluency is not. So if you're someone who genuinely dreads phone calls, who has told yourself for years that this is a flaw you should fix, I want to offer you something slightly different. The question isn't whether you should become someone who loves phone calls. That's probably not going to happen, and it doesn't need to. The question is whether your preference is working for your life or quietly limiting it. There's a difference between a communication style and a wall. A style is flexible. It has reasons. It can adapt when something actually matters. A wall keeps everything out equally, including the things worth letting in. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The people in your life who need you to pick up the phone sometimes aren't wrong either. For them, voice is where the real thing lives. The text version of you, as articulate and thoughtful as it might be, will never fully land for someone whose primary emotional language is spoken. So this isn't about choosing a side. It's about understanding your own defaults well enough to know when to honor them and when to stretch past them for someone else. Awareness of why you do something is only useful if it actually changes something. Otherwise, it's just a more sophisticated way of staying exactly where you are. If you recognize yourself in what you've been reading today, and you also recognize that the pattern has cost you something, a relationship, an opportunity, a version of yourself you wanted to be by now, that gap between knowing and changing is real. And information alone doesn't close it. If that's where you are right now, there's something in the pinned comment worth looking at. A 7-day reset bundle built specifically around this kind of pattern. Overthinking, emotional blocks, and building consistent follow-through in a way that doesn't ask you to rely on motivation or force your way through it. It's broken into daily steps, so it doesn't become another thing you understand but never actually do. It's designed to be worked through. If that feels relevant, hit like and subscribe to the channel for more videos.